We will get our work session underway here. Is it panelists too? Because there's somebody in
It's
the other room.
It's the
Okay,
other room.
gotcha. All right, we will start by not having any board and commission interviews. Is there anything anyone wants to review on the regular agenda? No, all right. How about updates? Emerson, would you like to start for us?
Will Mayor, no updates.
David?
Nothing from me, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
I'm still thinking.
Okay, we'll come back to you.
I just did one thing between our last meeting and I attended ARB meeting, which is my pleasure. And really cool that project for Moody Avenue was introduced there. And I was sorry I was on Zoom because I wanted to look at the practice, but that's going to be really fantastic.
Because we were pretty bad a couple of years ago.
They're very excited too, which really.
Yeah. Emily?
Green Space met and that was a good meeting. They had we went over the Green Our City event, which was a big success. So that was great. Upcoming, we've got the Make a Difference Day later in October. I want to say it's the 26th of October. So if people are interested in either submitting a project for that or volunteering for that, there's information out on the city's socials and website about that. Plan Commission meets beginning of November, so all that dates.
Excellent. City Attorney.
In solidarity with Councilman Franklin and Smith, I have nothing to report.
All right. Does either the assistant or the deputy city manager have anything they would like?
Just briefly, Dr. Peoples is having some trouble joining, but she will have an update when she gets joined. So,
Okay, so we will come back to her at that time. I don't have much today. Just wanted to thank Katie. The new Muni code is live. So, and I've given it a little bit of a test drive. So I think it is easier, but it's on our website in case you're interested, some explanatory information as well about how to navigate it. So if you find yourself in there a lot, you might want to download that part of it. Just a reminder that there is the comprehensive plan workshop on the 22nd at the rec center. I asked Dr. Peoples to check with our consulting team to find out whether this is an event where they want us there or whether they would prefer we not be there and as people. So somebody will let us all know that before the event next Tuesday, just so we're operating the best capacity. And then I did, after too long, and I apologize for that, did send you all the strategic planning kind of summary document. We will on November 19th have that be our only work session item so that we can work our way through that in the work session. I wanted to do it when we knew that Dr. Peoples would be in the room rather than remote. That made more sense. All right. Well, then I think if we are all right.
I just needed to have
A moment.
thoughts.
Yes.
Old Orchard met last week and they are heading into planning the holiday festival, which there will be Santa, there will be cookies, there will be a movie out on the triangle. And also lighting, Ms. Tyler is working on getting all the lighting fixed and getting Strive out there so everyone has those up and working well, all of them. And then tonight we'll be hearing from Sean and Dr. Sharon Locke and Claudia who's the intern or the grad student from SIU, talk about the greenhouse gas inventory. So she will be reporting on this effort that's been happening for about the last year or so. So this will be a good time to hear the results. That's all I have.
All right. That does remind me also Oktoberfest in Old Webster this weekend on Saturday. So don't forget that as well. All right. We will dive right into our topics. And who's going to kick us off here?
Mr. Donovan.
All right, Mr. Donovan, the floor is yours.
Right. So we have the quarterly update regarding finance update.
So we'll be taking a look at the
Way down.
Quick in there.
oh, okay. So we're going over the fiscal year 24, so taking care of the, looking at the budget versus actuals for last fiscal year, as well as going over the first quarter of fiscal year 2025. All those that watching online, this is where you can find our budget, webster.gov/budget. All the budget documents and quarterly updates can be found there. So go over the soft close on the budget performance for last fiscal year. We will take a look at our budget performance so far in fiscal year 25. We'll go over the quarterly investment report. I will have a brief discussion on budget amendments that for future consideration, as well as an update on the bond sale schedule. So take a look at last year's budget performance versus actuals. So in 2024, as you can see, this is for all funds. We had a budget of 31.9 million for revenue, took in 30.7 million, so about 96.16%. Expenditures, we had budgeted for 30.6 million and we came in at 26.1, so about 85.31%. So it ended up being a delta of about $4.6 million between actual revenue and expenses. And I did want to comment on the budget revenue the revenue as we look at it. Just digging into the details, we had budgeted in the grant funds, and this is going to inform our discussion later in the presentation related to budget amendments. We had anticipated, perhaps hoped for, getting the EV grant from the Department of Transportation, I believe. And so we included $2.5 million, both as an expense, but also as a revenue inside of the grant fund. Yeah, we did not get the grant. So if you take a look at the budget for revenues and you back that 2.5 million out, you come out to about 29.4. So we actually, the revenue, even though it shows that we came in less than expected, we actually, in real dollars, if we take out that expectation of that revenue within the budget, we end up exceeding revenue over budget for the rest of our revenue lines by about 1.27 million. So we actually did really well on the revenue side of things. And we'll look at revenue highlights here later on. So what some of those highlights were. So we'll get into that in a minute. So good.
I'm sorry, Greg, did you say, was it 2.4 is the?
So we had put 2.5 million in for
2.5,
the
okay.
EV grants, yes.
That's on the budget side, but not the actual side. So if you
Correct.
drop the
Yeah.
budget down, it shows the budget. Yeah.
Right. So both on the revenue and
Yeah.
expense side. So
Is that the same for the expenditures?
right, so you would back out 2.5 million in terms of the budget on expenditures. So I did that math, Councilman, and so that brings us back to approximately 28.1 million. So in terms of expenses, we still were under by almost exactly $2 million. So on the expense side. In the general funds, the budgeted revenue, so this is the general fund being our main operating fund, or major fund. So the revenue exceeded, we had 110% of anticipated revenue. And we were under on the expenditure side. So we ended up with a $3 million delta between revenue and over expenditures. So that was a pretty solid budget performance and actual performance there. happy to see if there are any questions that I hopefully be able to answer.
So in addition to the, obviously the EV charger plays a role in this, but we still come out in the black pretty significantly.
Yes.
Are there particular things we can attribute to that? I mean, I know we had, for example, some open positions over periods of time. But can you pinpoint one or two or three things that it might be an explanation for that?
Sure. We had, I think the most significant thing in terms of personnel was with the police department. So we were understaffed in the police department I think we ended the year, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, like 10 open positions, I think is what we ended the year with. So we had 10 open positions in the police department at the end of the year. So that was significant just in salaries. That was $231,000. So that was one thing that stood out to me. And that has a downstream impact. So it's not, it ends up not just being their salary, right? There's benefits that we don't end up paying. So especially to loggers, our retirement plan, and to medical insurance and things like that. So there's a downstream impact of just not having the salary line, but it ends up adding, and in this case, another couple $100,000 in expenses that we would have had we been fully staffed, particularly in the police department. That's the one that really stood out to me. Fire department came out almost exactly where we wanted it to, and in the expense line.
I think the other expenses that I would look at in all funds, we obviously had street improvement. We ended up moving something into this
Right.
budget that would have showed up in 24, some of those projects. There also was, when you look at the FEMA buyouts were included in the 24 budget, now moved into 25. So we've got some of those one-time moments in other funds that combined in the capital and special revenue side give you that larger delta in the all funds. The general fund has reported those as $1 million of savings, most of which is going to be salary line item of savings, or you're looking at some of the purchases we were able to make out of capital or other funds that had been historically done from the general.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Looking at our current quarter, for the entire year, we have a $45 million budget. Obviously, the biggest piece of that is the water park renovation and a rebuild. And so, so far this year, we've had 4.7 million in revenue and 6.7 million in expenditures. And so we're under where we were last year. I'm not all that concerned. Our revenue comes in, the biggest chunk of our revenue comes in December and January, when property taxes and personal property and real estate taxes are paid. So I don't think that there's any alarm bells here. I would say that sales taxes maybe 2 or 3% lower than last year. And we had a bang out year last year for sales and use tax, which we'll see when we get to the revenue highlights a little bit later on. So but I don't see any cause for concern at the moment with respect to these numbers. It just happens to be where we're sitting at this point in time. A snapshot.
Mm-hmm. And for members, when you look at sales tax at a Q1 number, you only really have 1 or 2 months of sales tax rather than full 3 months, given the reporting lag.
Wasn't there some delayed revenue last year from property taxes or something like that that might have like made our 23 numbers look, or last year's numbers look a little bit.
There was actually, we got in about, I want to say in May, we got an extra $300,000 in real estate taxes. So that comes in, and those are protested payments. So everyone in the community, businesses, local, primarily businesses, who say that they shouldn't have to pay those taxes or they're being overcharged. And so when that gets sorted out with the county, then the county sends us a pickup check as well. So.
Thanks.
This specifically the general fund. So where we're at in terms of, you know, budget revenue and expenditures versus last year. There is, again, as Eric mentioned, when we get income in July and August, because of our counting method that we're required to use, it's called modified accrual. We actually have, because that money was earned in the previous fiscal, so we do this every year. Because that money was earned in the previous fiscal year, but we're getting it paid in July and August, so it does come in, but we put it back to the previous fiscal year. So we have to accrue it back to last year. And for sales taxes for the county, they're 2 months behind. So the state's 1 month behind, the county is 2 months behind. So even the money we get in sales tax in July and August from the county, that goes back into the previous fiscal year. So it deflates these numbers when we're doing our comparisons as we look at where the money is. So I mentioned revenue spotlights, and this is just in the general fund. We, you know, compared to budget versus the actual amount, pretty close on property taxes, although I would say, and this again goes to our budget amendment conversation, we'll bring up here in a minute. We did a pretty decent job last year, and it's easier to do with the real estate and personal property taxes because we get the assessment from the county, we have our tax rate. So we do a initial estimate at the beginning of the year based on previous year's income, but when the assessment comes in, which we won't get for a few more weeks, and at the end of the month actually, and then we can go and say, okay, we budgeted, let's just say we budgeted, you know, the 1.4 million in property taxes for, or let's say we budgeted 1.5, but we can then calculate at the end of this month, well, we're actually going to get 1.7. And what we did last year, we came to you with a budget amendment and said we want to increase the revenue for that particular line. So we end up getting, like on property tax, it's like almost looks like from a budgeting standpoint, we nailed it. But we actually amended the budget up because we had a better idea of what it was actually going to be. However, as you can see with sales tax, we had a bang up, our use tax, we budgeted 775,000 for use tax, and we came in at 1.2 million. So, which means that the citizens of Webster Groves, they like to shop online.
Keep doing it.
So it would also, you know, to commend both the council, to commend both the council, all of you, as well as the citizens for enacting that, because when I went to the GFOA conference for the state of Missouri back in May, and several people, they were asking me like, how much are you going to get? I'm like, I'm going to get about 1.2 million. And they're like, no way, our council refuses to, you know, even consider passing the tax, you know, or even, you know, and obviously it still has to go to the voters, right? But there are a lot of cities and municipalities around the state who aren't even looking at that as a possibility. And it turned out to be a really great revenue stream for
I
the
do
city
have
of
a
Webster.
question about that.
Sure.
Does the use tax go into the pool? Or do we bet, it's not part of the pool, it's
Comes-
separate, straight to us?
Straight to us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that comes straight to us. So that does not sit in the pool for the county. So utility taxes were a little higher. The inspection fees, I don't think that's and permits, there we go, we took in 1.1 million and we just, again, another year, our building permits were exceeded budget expectations, so that's another thing that's city of Webster goes, our residents like to renovate their homes. So put in those pools and whatever else they like to do, so.
Did
We
you
get
make a modest adjustment to those fees last year? The inspection fees?
We may have.
We did.
Yeah, it's really the cause there's gonna be volume though, the volume of the permits and those
So
inspection
it's,
fees.
it's a lot of volume in terms of the permits. But that also includes, you know, if but university wants to do something, they said they're still paying, you know, permits as well, and the businesses too. So if the business changes hands, they're doing a renovation, that it becomes a business permit. So those are some of the highlights there. So, and zeroing in on the sales tax. So this is, you know, so the use tax came in $500,000 over, you know, even the pooled sales tax came in 170,000. And this, you know, so we here's what we budgeted for this year based on what we received last year. So, and we budgeted, you know, we budgeted an increase, but that is something that we're going to have to pay attention to. Right? So, you know, we don't know which way it's going to go. It's an election year, you know, the economy could be, you know, whatever it is, interest rates are going lower. So that can also affect people and their spending habit. You know, we don't know, we can't foresee or predict, you know, which way the economy is going to go and how people will continue to spend their money. Also, we benefited, one thing that's not up here, we had an extra $200,000 than expected in gasoline taxes. So with gas prices being higher, we ended up getting much more in gasoline taxes. If you've noticed at the pump, which is great for my pocketbook, those prices have gone down, but that means the taxes go down too. So that means you'll take in less. So these are, we talked about just expenditure highlights in terms of, you know, where we were and what we expected to spend in 24, what we actually spent. So, you know, there's the, you know, to your question, we were $567,000 less in terms of total personnel costs than what we budgeted. So,
And it's only because of the empty spots we have.
right. So primarily that's driven also, you know, in terms of, you know, retirements, you know, and you might, so, you know, Chief Curtis was only here for 6 months. We had budgeted for a full year. We, you know, hadn't hired a chief for, you know, that took a long time. So, you know, as an example, so you have those lagging as well. So those unexpected vacancies too, or retirements end up contributing to that as well. So. And that's just, this is general funds. So this is going into this year and switching gears, looking at our overtime spend so far. So here's our budget for overtime. I know that you all have had an eye on this, particularly with regards to police and fire. So here's where we're at. So you can see that the police, you know, has already used 34% of their overtime budget. That's to be expected. Their biggest overtime events, you know, Jazz Fest, community days, and that, so that incurs a lot of overtime. So that should level itself out as we go through the year. So, and again, now that we're adding staff, so we have more. I met one of our new officers today, so that will also, you know, decrease the need for that overtime, you know, for others using that overtime.
Maintenance.
Yes.
Appears to be awfully low. It's always budgeted was 1,000.
So Yes, and it's a conversation that I'll have to have with Dr. Peoples in conjunction with Scott. Obviously, I don't, or Mr. Davis, and so in looking at that I would say during the summertime, there's a lot more park maintenance that needs to be done than there is in the winter, so that should come down. However, we budgeted that on historic levels, and we've used certainly, I would say, more than expected than we had planned for the budget. So it's not, I don't think it's, I don't think the $725, I don't think that in of itself is unreasonable, but that's probably a conversation that we need to have with them and with Scott and Dr. Peoples and say, okay, is this $1,000 reasonable for your budget for overtime, or do you anticipate this to be an ongoing?
I'm just thinking of the pool, the projects we got going on in the rec.
Sure.
Recreation area, would that number need to be, I guess, increased any?
It probably based on these numbers, I would say it probably does. So a conversation that we would need to have. So, good question.
And just on overtime in general, would it be fair to say that some of the numbers that we see in overtime are because we have the vacancies in the full-time positions? So the people that are there are working a little bit more to fill that out. So we're saving on the full-time salary, but we're paying a little bit more in overtime.
I would think that that's fair to say, particularly in some of the areas. So for sure. For the investment reports, this is the high level view of in terms of total investments and cash. We're at the end of the quarter, we are at 27.1 million. 11.5 of that is considered investments. You can see our liquidity ratio is, we have 57.75% liquid versus 42.25. I'm going to come back to that. Our yield spread ranges from 2% to 5.36, the weighted average yield at 4.57. Our yields are going to go down. So let's be clear about that. The bank didn't hesitate to drop ours by 0.5% on what we're getting on our insured cash sweep and the commercial paper sweep. I just got that increase at 2%, and they whacked it down to 1.5. Didn't even bother to call me. So
You sound a little insulted.
I am. I feel like if you have a relationship manager, they should at least say, "Hey, this is what's going to happen if the Fed does X, we're going to do Y." So we're going to have to go back to. I'm going to have a conversation with them. But anyway, that's where we're at. So we should expect the yield to come down. Now, when I put the budget together and with Mr. Peterson and estimating the interest income for this year, I had already factored that in on an annualized basis. So I did two things, and I'm going to reference it's not in it's not in the PowerPoint, but you'll have this kind of breakout where it breaks out the specific investments. So a couple of things I did take us out a little bit longer with in terms of treasuries through Commerce Bank to 2026 maturity. So to lock in money. So and you may ask me, why those particular amounts? That just happened to be the cash I had to move around from something else. So did stretch that out a little bit. I also, because we hadn't made any final decisions on when we're going to do the bond sale, I also have been moving to not reinvesting some money, so keeping more liquid. So liquidity ratio is high for two reasons. It's too high sitting at 55% total in cash. The high, it's high because I don't know when the Westport Pools is going to bill us for the pool. So they may say in December or January, we want our $10 million. So obviously we need to have that on hand to be able to pay if they ask for it. We know we're going to get that money back. Bond proceeds, we'll be able to invest that and get, interest on that within, there's a couple of different rules related to that, but we'll be able to get interest on it. So we're going to get that money back, but I thought it was prudent to have the extra cash on hand to make sure that we could cover that. However, generally speaking, we usually sit around 45 to 50% in cash. And we're looking at, our fund balance policy, and I know you've had this discussion with Mr. Peterson, and we've looked at it. Currently, the fund policy adopted in 2022 was that we wanted to have 50% basically of our 6 months of operating expenses on hand at any given time. Now, in 2 years that I've been here, the closest we've ever come to, getting down in terms of actual cash in our bank account, we were still $4.5 million. We're over our $1 million. So we get $1 million in the base, or 4 point, then it sweeps in excess of that. So the lowest we've ever gotten down into our bank accounts since I've been here is 5.5. That's the lowest we've ever gotten. So we do a really good job of spreading out our expenses. We get a significant sum of money from property and real estate taxes. We do really well there. So that's a conversation we need to continue to have. If that 50% is, can be reduced, or, do we really need 6 months on hand? So can we go back and forth? What's the flexibility there? So I would say, right now, we have about $17 million sitting in cash. Our 6 month average, or 6 months, if we just cut our budget or expenditures in half, it's 13 million. So we're about 4 million in excess at the moment. And so that does need to come down, just waiting on see what we're going to get from the pool, and then we'll readjust there. So that's my general comment on we're high. And I don't think we need to be that high, but that's where we're at. So
I'm going to just hop in quickly on that. I would expect Westport, likely before, when we talk about bond sales, and we're going to get to that in a second, when we're talking about a January sale, would expect maybe 5 million would go out the door by that point, maybe.
Okay.
So we're really in a very much pre-design stage right now, not pre-design, but design stage and finalizing those factors. So I do not expect the full $10 million. We'll encumber it, but in terms of actually needing to put cash on.
Great, for a city our size, there is specific liquidity ratio we should maintain.
look at the GFOA standard. They would say base it on your cash flow, in terms of looking at so I think that 50% is conservative for us. They would say look at your 12-month cash flow and cash prediction, or estimate, what's coming in, what's going out, how much you're going to need, and then base it off of that. So they don't really prescribe it like a city of X size. If we're looking at that, I would say that we are extremely well positioned for a city of our size, and that's something that we need to continue to have discussions about and take your guidance on, in that respect.
So looking at a trend, maybe 3, 5, 7 year trend would be a better estimate of where we should be, I guess.
I think we could do some of that analysis for sure. So, looking at that over time, and, our previous 7 years obviously includes COVID. So we'll have to do some figuring in there, right? So and taking that into account. And the ARPA funds that came in, that jacked up, income as well. So, but all things being equal, yes, we should take a look at that, probably multi-year trends and see what that looks like, and then come to a perhaps more informed, discussion on or consideration of what we should, be keeping on hand in terms of what we hear. So, okay. We pay our bills and I do my best to pay them on time. So, but that depends on when people turn in their invoices. So, so then going to that, I alluded to this several times, and I apologize, I'm probably going way over my time allotment.
You're okay so far, no problem.
In last fiscal year, Mr. Peter worked, really hard to try to, as I pointed out with that, especially with the real, the property taxes, like, can we target it? How we close those variances, right? Because we say, the city needs to do X, Y, Z, or take, cost saving measures and things like that. And then you can't continue to come in, right? $2 million, $3 million over what, you originally budgeted for. So the goal is to try to narrow those down. So one of those things, and then this goes to the grant as well, is that, like for the grant fund, when we know what the actual grant income is, instead of simply doing it based on an application, right? And when we get the award, then come back to you and say, council, we got awarded this particular grant, so we need to add X amount of dollars in terms of revenue and expense to this year's budget, and try to keep those things much more closely aligned as best we can. We're never going to get, I think we're never going to hit it spot on, right? But try to get close those gaps. And so I think that over the course of the fiscal year, particularly as and like with sales tax, as we look at the 6-month mark, and we get into January and February, we may come back to you and say, okay, we're not gonna get there. Let's reduce, the expected budget amount so that we can zero in on those types of things. So, and as it says, number 2, align budget estimates with what's actually happening, and identify those trends, with a shorter time, trying to be a bit more nimble instead of setting the budget at the beginning of the year, really right last May, June, and then just letting it ride through the course of the year. So I would agree with this case. That's probably it sets expectations a lot better, not only for you but also for the community. So and members of the city. Next quarter, these are the likely ones, and I've already talked about the property tax, amendment. So we'll, recalculate when we get the assessments. Keep an eye on sales tax, and then I already talked about this entire slide. So as we see, for grants, one specific one, police overtime grants, so we're the varying fiscal years, end with the federal and the state, all that sort of stuff. So then we'll have an idea of, what those grants, are looking like, what we've been awarded, what we can anticipate over the course of the year. So Sergeant Flannery does a really great job with the police overtime grants. He takes care of all of that for us, managing that. And then the bond sales. So our conversations, Mr. Peterson, himself, and Dr. Peoples, we were looking at, as well as a conversation with our municipal advisor, Joy Howard. We should we think that the bond sale should be moved to January, so we're in the process of putting together depending on what your feedback, of course. What a calendar would look like between now and then in terms of getting everything together. Because, the betting markets are fully expecting additional Fed rate cuts, and that likely in November and likely again in December, but also in December, what happens is it's called the January effect. The municipal bond market kind of shuts down in December because those folks have made their money and, they clear out the books and, they go home for Christmas for a couple weeks. So, they, vacation and whatnot. But as soon as January comes, they will ramp up buying their municipal bonds. And so it becomes more competitive in terms of the interest rate market, in terms of what we would have to pay on that, as well as you factor in some of the lowering of the Fed rates. So the expectation there. So I believe it's going to be to our benefit. We believe it's going to be to our benefit to wait until January. That would be our recommendation to all of you. Prior to the sale, we would, complete our official statement. We have our rating call with Moody's, and they give us, was AA1 or whatever their different ratings are. They give us the rating, and then we mentioned this earlier, liquidity in the current cash, we will be able to take care of any anticipated bills related to Destination WG between now and then replenish that, if it's even needed between now and then, we'll replenish that with bond sales. And, the bond sales will also become part of our investment portfolio to be able to earn interest on. And the way the rules work is that we can't earn more interest than we're paying. And if we do, it's called arbitrage, and then we have to give that money back to the federal government. So we don't want to do that. But the idea would be is that, whatever our percentage interest rate that we're paying on our bonds, we can invest those proceeds and hopefully earn some of that back. So it reduces our costs long term in terms of interest for the bond sale.
When you do that bond sale, do we, as a council, get to do our normal
Yes.
stuff?
Yes. So yes,
There's none, so how fast do you normally have to move on a bond sale?
so we anticipate the last schedule I saw from our advisor is that we would be doing the readings in December, our anticipated those council meetings. Then we have our ratings call. I believe the ratings call after the reading.
So that schedule was a December sale. So a January sale, just to give you a sense of it, all these actions will happen before January, the ratings call and such like that. And then you have your first and second reading, January 7th, I believe it is,
January.
Of an ordinance. And then in that intervening time, that's when the final bids are received and such. And essentially, remember, we're not saying, we say through the bid, this process of selling, what do we want to pay? Then we're going to receive those. And on your third reading, we're going to say, we're going to sell 17.195 to X company. And these are the terms that in the sale that are part of that in your third reading. And then that goes to the state auditor for clearance. And then the sale is finalized with state auditor's approval probably by the end of January. So you're really taking action in January. December, November are used for the ratings call, the official statement, the work of Ms. Howard and the staff preparing that essentially again for a competitive bid process is what's happening as the companies submit. This is what we'll give you as a package, right? So we're looking best interest rate that, a seller or buyer's wishing to get out of us and such like that.
Do you all need from us anything formally saying we agree to the January sale?
We don't need anything informal, but if you wholly disagree, then we need to know what timeline you would like to go.
Is there anyone who has a problem with the January timeline? All right, I think that's the answer.
But I believe that rate's gonna do something really screwy before the end of the year. That we'll have to be making some.
So the rates have come down obviously overall, but it goes to the employment rate, right? That came out and all of a sudden the rate moved up just a little bit. You know what I mean? And so those kinds of market fluctuations are always gonna come. It's why we can't say we think we're gonna be right at this rate, because even the morning of, someone who knows the milk price report may come up, the rates go changing, you know, that's smaller reports have changed interest rates and political outcomes many times, so.
We get a report every week from our advisor saying, you know, this is kind of where they're at for going into the week and stuff like that, so.
And-
We do keep an eye on it.
And she's been our bond advisor, 3 or 4 cycles of bonds at least, yeah.
Certainly since the 2011
Yeah.
general obligation series, so.
So, for the council, I just to add on one final thing. I know Mr. Donovan's gonna give you the link, but I want you all to keep in mind on the debt issues. To remember to be asking about defeasances. So this is the important part of the capacity of your debt tax that you have. Because it, you know, is booked out in our minds at a certain rate and interest rate. So you're gonna have more capacity sooner. You know, with these bonds, it's not gonna be tomorrow, but the point is we can start defeasing, and that's Ms. Howard will help the team with that.
Yeah.
Do those defeasances to keep your capacity in that tax rate. Otherwise, it's gonna go down. And your next no new tax increase bond rate is gonna buy less than that capacity. So,
And we've had a pretty good history of doing that.
Yes.
On regular schedules, yeah.
but it's just important to, that's
Yeah,
how you
it's gotta-
hold that tax
yeah.
rate.
Any other questions that
Does anybody have questions?
maybe answer?
It's good that you had a lot of these maturities of first quarter of 25.
Yes, yeah. It's just how it is.
It's gonna go way down. So
Yeah, we're gonna, you know, and we've talked, it's kind of unavoidable, unfortunately, that we're gonna, you know. keep that,
But let's also not forget the compliment that is owed to you in getting us in a much better
Yes.
position to take advantage of rates when they were higher, so. I know you don't get to magically determine them, but we appreciate the work you did to get us
And
in a
shopping.
position. Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation and the update. And thank you all for everyone on our city staff for keeping us in pretty good shape here. That's really nice to not to come into one of these and feel like it's really bad news. So thank you for that. We do have a little bit left. Although we didn't interview anyone tonight, there's some reappointments to consider. Green Space Advisory Commission, Corin Purcell has served 1 term and wishes to be reappointed. Yes, okay. Historic Preservation, Carol Dunkey has served 2 years, completing a term for another member. She wishes to be reconsidered for appointment to a full term. I guess I should tell you also, since it's also Historic Preservation Commission, Angela Thompson served 1 term and wants to be reappointed as well. So that would be 2 people, but not exceeding our rule or, everybody's good with that? Okay. And then just so you all know, Emily Horton, who we recently reappointed, has resigned due to some family health issues. So we do have a Green Space Advisory Commission opening that we thought we didn't have. So, and I did look today and we do have openings on a number of boards and commissions. So it's time for each of us to take a look at that and do a little bit of recruiting if we can. Katie's got an updated list on the city website right now of those vacancies. All right, we are moving right on time, unless Karen, did you have anything that you wanted to update us on?
We didn't, we met, planning commission met last week, and there was a garage demo that was approved, and then they actually,
You said planning, did you mean
I'm
HBC?
sorry, HBC.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I even wrote down planning commission. And I read that. HBC.
Sometimes it's just one of those days.
Exactly, you know, it's been one of those weeks. But anyway, we had conversations again around developing conservation districts. And one of the things that I was really clear with them about was what Neil shared with us about the challenge of enforcing those. But what they are going to do is, I said, well, it's because they're saying, well, you can do this and you can do that. I said, well, how about this? You guys create your subcommittee. You sit down, you devise your plan or whatever it is that you think, you know, you would like to see and how you think we might be able to implement something like that. And then you can present it. That's, you know, so.
Yeah, and I would say also, Karen, one of the things we did with the sustainability plan was instead of waiting until they had fully done a plan,
Uh-huh.
we had them come do kind of an education set
Okay.
for the council that says, here's what this is.
Okay.
Here's some of the ideas that we're thinking about,
Okay.
so that before they put too much work into it, they at least get a little feedback from council. So
Okay.
that might be an alternative as well.
And they would
just
really appreciate
conservation districts were mentioned by multiple members in our strategic plan
Exactly.
tactics thing, which we'll discuss on the 19th. But
Okay.
so it does mean, I think we're consistent to let them go ahead and run with that, but I don't want them to spend too much work before we get an update and make sure we're all feeling good about the direction they're going.
And what type of time frame do you think is reasonable for them to do that before they come and present something to us?
I mean, I think that's kind of
Up to
to
them?
them,
Okay.
and what they would do is when they feel like they're ready, they can fill out the request for council time
Okay.
and submit that, and then we'll get them on the agenda.
Okay. Will do. And that's all I got.
Great,
One
thank
more.
you. Yeah.
Trees of distinction. The leaves are turning, so it's a great time to take photos and submit nominations for the Trees of Distinction program that Green Space runs for the city. Information's on the city website, on the Friday page, lots of different places. But trees are starting to turn, so it's a really good time to remember that. Applications are open through the end of December, so plenty of time. It's just a good time to those photos.
All right, Eric, do you have anything else? I know Dr. Peoples has.
Dr. Peoples will be joining through the regular meeting.
Okay.
Our Zoom settings block other countries, and we can't change those settings mid-meeting, so we're gonna change it on the break.
Oh, okay, so then we'll get her then, okay. Great, well then we'll get ready to start right there at 7:30 in council chambers, so thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Emily.
Dr. Peoples. Yes, okay, we're gonna, I know that you have something to share with us. We'll do that in new business and get to our celebration right now, if that works for you. Okay. All right, so we're gonna stop for a minute, and I apologize that this wasn't on the official agenda, but we have a recognition of our Assistant City Manager and Director of Finance, who joins us on the dais today, much to his chagrin, is this recognition coming forward. But Eric, we have to say this much, and I'll start a little bit and let other council members say what they might like to say. It would be terrible not to recognize you, because I think we all have to acknowledge that we have not made life easy for you. And in spite of that, you have always remained focused on solving problems for us with a great attitude, and I really very much appreciate that. And this was in the Webster Kirkwood Times, and I'm going to repeat it now to your face, and that is, I don't know anybody, I'm not sure I've met anybody who understands the big picture and the minute details both as well as you do and can explain them. So thank you for that and sharing that talent with us. And then I will also say, we haven't done lobbying around here before, at least to my knowledge, at the state level to the national level, and you've been a great partner in teaching many of us how to do that in a way that's more effective and always making us prepared. And then I also want to compliment you on your work ethic. I know that people ask you all the time to do things, or you volunteer to do things. And somehow it seems as if once you've done them, you don't give them back much. And so I know that also means that you've worked very hard for us, and it's greatly appreciated. So for your work, your sense of humor, your professionalism, and everything else, I just want to say I'm very thankful. And if there are other members who might like to say something, Councilmember Franklin, I think you mentioned you would, so.
Eric, there's something to be said about public service and something that I think our generations unfortunately do not heed the call to a degree that previous generations do. To spend not only your career in public service, but also the past couple of years here at a local government, making us better and making the lives of the citizens better, something that I think is so often overlooked. I just want to thank you for making this city so much more professional, so much more modern, and so much better in so many ways. I think everyone that interacts with Webster, it used to be they knew Chief Curtis, but I think it is that they know you now. And that's because you have your hands involved in everything. Not necessarily because you want to, but because you have the drive and the dedication, the commitment to actually doing the work of the citizens and the taxpayers. And so for that, I thank you, and the citizens of Webster Groves owe you a debt of gratitude and appreciation. We are better because of you, and we are sorely gonna miss you around here.
Eric, I recently had a conversation with a team member report, and it was around what it says about an individual's character when you have the ability to show up in less than favorable conditions and still do the work and do it at the highest level, because that is what someone with integrity and professionalism does. And that's what you've done. You stepped into a mess, not citywide, but I mean, it just was not a nice situation. But you did not allow that to prevent you from doing the work and doing it at the level and that you have, and having the results that we've been able to benefit from as a city as a result. And for that, I mean, I have the ultimate respect and appreciation for you, and will solely miss you.
I will echo all of the comments that the last three have said. Your work ethic here at the Webster Groves has been excellent. And you didn't stop because of bad chatter going on in the community about you, but I think you have redeemed yourself. The city is in a better shape financially because of your expertise. And it has shows what dedication you had to this organization. But on a personal level, I have learned so much from you, just listening to your explanation of how things should run and how it will affect us and help us make our decisions. I will say before, we just did not have that level of understanding. We just sometimes took it for granted that this is it, but you showed us, no, it's more behind those numbers than that we need to consider. So definitely wish you well, good voyages, wherever your next position is going to be, wherever, but you will be missed.
Eric, I'd just like to say, you have an attraction about you. You know, there's some people that promote themselves and you attract people, which is a skill that's learned, but I think it comes naturally to you. I think you've helped Webster Groves, you've helped council and staff. You brought us up to date, you bring us along, you create buy-in. It's not easy to change or create change unless you bring other people along with you. And so it's just an incredible trait of yours. And I think it's very unique and not found very often. And related to that, I mean, you know, you hear the term change agent. I think you're also a truth agent or an honest agent. You bring a certain amount of integrity, you call things out directly, and it's just a very nice trait. It's been so refreshing working with you. I can't wait to hear what you do next.
I'll echo all of that and add a little bit too. I wanted to, I had the opportunity to go to the Columbia or Jeff City with you and Kansas City with you. And for me as a new council member, seeing the lobbying side of things, just the logistics of it, the leave behind sheets, like the research, that was all totally new to me. And it was just so well done, so professional, and as an education to me too. So I really appreciate that. And you know, people have talked about your presentations. They're so thorough and so easy to understand. And you anticipate the questions that we have, which for me is just a real key thing, and really shows that you are fully immersed and fully understand all the information that you're sharing with us. And I really appreciate that. You know, you've been here longer than I have. So it'll be strange for me when that changes, but honestly, it's been a joy to work with you, and really looking forward to your next adventures.
Well, I thought this was going to be a roast. I had to
He might have preferred that.
jot some things down. I'm just kidding. I am like, I know you're such a humble person, and to sit here and to let us pour words of praise over you. I know that you were so uncomfortable, but I really I've been here the shortest amount of time, so I'm not going to take it as it's my fault that you're leaving. You should choose it. But I am so bummed that I don't get to learn more from you in the short time that I've had. Your knowledge, your scope of understanding, the history of this place, it's like you've been here forever. What you are able to bring to the table has always just amazed me. I'm going to miss that. And those are big shoes to fill. We're going to need a couple pairs, I think. And your patience, your kindness, just how like you took complex topics that still blow my mind a little bit, finance stuff, and you broke it down and made it really simple for me when you were helping me kind of learn how to get started here. So really gonna miss all that you bring, your positivity, your work, your wit. And I just wish you nothing but the best in your next chapter.
All right, so you didn't want a proclamation, so this isn't a formal proclamation, but I'm going to ask you to promise one thing before we move forward, is that you're going to have to show your mother all this. A mother would love to hear everything that's been said about you. So, all right, here we go. The city of Webster Groves thanks Eric Peterson for his dedication to the city, his insight into the financial needs of the city, and perseverance in upgrading all things technology have moved the city forward in leaps and bounds. Not only has Eric done amazing things for the city, his participation in the National League of Cities, Missouri Municipal League, GFOA, and other organizations have brought the city an abundance of new ideas and opportunities. Eric's enthusiastic and kind personality has truly been an asset to the city. On behalf of the City Council, we thank and honor Eric Peterson, Assistant City Manager and Director of Finance and Administration, and do hereby proclaim Friday, October 25th as Eric Peterson Day in the city of Webster Groves. Council, come down. All of us come down. We read the street sign because you know you weren't going to leave without it. Yeah, that's over. You hand it over. I'll be yeah. Here, go on there. All right, there you go. All right. Before we never did. Okay, but we're gonna let our friend Dave go off. That's his spell. There's the stage. Go first. So Mr. Bach, come on out. Council, we can sit down, I think. Would you like Eric in the seat or down here?
All right.
Eric, Mike, we go over there so the camera picks you up. How's that?
Did you write
Okay,
it?
well, that's fine. We'll look this way. And that way the camera will get it. How's that sound?
Okay, well, I wanted to remind Eric, first of all, that he ultimately reports to the residents. He reports to me. I'm his boss today. And we sat down and had a little performance evaluation on Eric. And instead of verbalizing it, I'm going to sing it. Song is your way. And now the end is near. And so you face the final curtain. Our friend will say it clear. We'll state our case of which we're certain. You've lived a life that's full. You've traveled each financial highway and more, much more than this. You did it your way. Memories more than a few, but then again, too many to mention. You did the job you had to do and saw it through without exemption. You guided each charted course, each careful step to a brighter day. And more, much more than this, you did it your way. For what is this man? What have you got? If not yourself, then you have not. To do the things you truly feel and not the deeds of one who kneels. The record shows you took the blows and did it your way. Now we aren't done. One of my favorite movies is The Wizard of Oz, and I love the part where the wizard goes through the bag and pulls out of medals and testimonials and stuff. Well, in our case, from the residents, we have a medal for you, Eric. Oh, thank you. You are first in our hearts, and I'm going to say you've really helped me out a lot in just 3.5 years. And although you've only been here 3.5 years, I think we have created a lifetime of friendship, and I really appreciate it. Appreciate it.
And this, oh, that's mine. Thank you. Well, there's another Grafika framing project for me before I go. Madam Mayor, members, the city manager, peoples, residents of Webster Groves, I don't often get to say personal things, so I meant what I said in the paper. This has not been the experience I thought I was going to have when I came to Webster Groves. It has been better, despite what I thought were some unfair moments, some attacks that didn't need to come. That's what public service is these days, unfortunately. If you're going to put your name on a ballot, or if you're going to work for government, you're going to have people that are uninformed, misinformed, decide to say things before they are informed. But this place has been a true treat for me to be a part of the work that we've done. I hate hearing things like you all have said about me. I just much rather would have slid away into the back curtain and walked home. But I can't say enough about this place. I can't say enough about the team of people. I appreciate very much your adulations of me, but it is all because of the people that work in this building that have stepped up to new moments and new challenges in our community, being willing to help us move those through. So I just, to all of you, thank you. To the community, thank you. To my teammates and those that have been a part of my team and other departments, thank you. Webster Groves has a very bright future, and I'm not concerned for that. I think what you have done, and to me, the most striking thing is to stop and think that, in 1953, the city reformed itself, recognizing what it had said about water in a pool and how Black people were going to infect the pool for white people. The city changed its form of government, the form of government you have today. Brought about a whole new day for the city, and I think we are still living in that reconciliation process, and I just see incredible work being done every day to understand that every person that comes to this city and lives in it, works in it, travels through it, and is a part of our life has value, has honor, has dignity.
and is a whole human being. And that is, to me, the purpose of local government, is to serve that community and all those that are a part of it. So thank you all.
So you thought it was over in terms of the saying things about you, but Dr. Peoples may not be in the room, but I think she still has a word or two to share. So Dr. Peoples.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, watching and listening to everybody's words, I echo all of it, and I'm a little speechless after hearing Mr. Buck sing, so I cannot follow that. And, you know, Eric, your somber words and hearing that, it's heartfelt, and I appreciate it. I'm going to miss you so incredibly much. The work that you have done, as everybody's already said, your willingness to come to the city, and just the dedication you've brought, the innovation. I really appreciate Councilwoman Bliss's comments, just the change agent as well as the truth agent. But the energy that you bring to everything that you do, to each of the teams, and just the fun. And on a personal level, you know, being in meetings with you, the connection that you make with people. So all of that is so incredibly important. It's going to be missed. And I think there's just no easier way or better way to say it than you really have incorporated yourself into the fiber of everything that we do. So best wishes to you. And you're going to hear lots more from me over the next couple of weeks.
Right. Okay, you can relax now. All right, we're going to move on to remarks from community and visitors, and Mr. Dave Buck.
Various topics. I think I've shared before that my life has been impacted by gun violence 4 different times. There was Kansas. First off, when I was 6 years old, in the Clutter family, people were shot on the stage, shot in the nation. When I was 11, in 1994, my two brothers were shot and killed by the mentally ill. 2 years later, in 1966, a family friend, Doug Wilson, was critically wounded at Texas, car shooting by drug equipment, you know. And then right here in Webster Grove in 2012, my good friends Chip McDonald, who was a fellow bipolar, he got up one Saturday morning, he got his locked handgun, walked over to Walter Ambrose playground, set up swings, put the gun in his mouth. I have never owned a gun, and I will never own a gun. I don't not begrudge people that own guns, but I want to just thank Neil and whoever else is responsible for those 3 gun control bills that are under new business on your agenda. I've lived here for 24 years, and I've never seen that happen. I've never seen city council, city hall even try to do it. I know that you're hamstrung by the state of Missouri, conceal and carry and open carry, who knows what. But I appreciate the try, and best of luck in moving that forward. I don't know how you did it. When I read those bills, it's like, I don't know how we're going to get through or I get approved, but I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Madam Mayor, if I may, the credit for that, for the idea moving forward actually goes to the mayor, Dave.
It's something that we as those of us who have been on council have been talking about, David and Pam and I, since we arrived. So thank you, Neil, but widely shared, I think, here. All right. New business. I believe I suggested to Dr. Peoples that if she had something she wanted to share with us, now might be the time.
Dr. Peoples, I did this if you had an update from the original meeting that you couldn't be on.
Oh, I was wondering. I was getting ready to.
Sorry, I should have been more clear.
I was getting ready to get real creative. Mr. Peterson, was this the pool update?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So Mr. Davis did share that there's going to be some work starting at the rec center. So most likely the rec center will not open until late on Thursday. instead of the normal 5:30 a.m., most likely it will be 9 a.m. But we're going to post all this on the website. We really encourage users to take a look, read the website, and make sure that it is open before going. There's going to be some water shutoffs and some other things that will not impact neighborhood, certainly, but just the building. So we want to make sure people are informed and not showing up for their morning workout.
All right, thank you.
I'm getting a message that the mic is not working for Zoom people.
Oh, it looks like maybe it wasn't on.
Yeah.
Eric turned it off.
Okay.
Okay, so when Dave spoke, we just got to remember to turn it on.
Okay,
Okay.
We could hear it, or I could hear it. It's just very low.
okay. All right. Thank you very much for that update, and thank you, Pam, for that. We're going to move to unfinished business, and Councilmember Hasselmeyer, could you call for the third reading of Bill number 9270, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to call for the, thank you, third and final reading for Bill number 9270.
Second.
Bill 9270, third and final reading. An ordinance authorizing and directing Missouri American Water Company to install one fire hydrant proximal to 680 West Lockwood Avenue in the city of Webster Groves, Missouri.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, we'll have the vote then, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yeah.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Hasselmeyer,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, we're going to move on to our new business. Our first item is our greenhouse gases inventory, and we will invite Sean Finnegan, our sustainability coordinator, to kick us off, and I hope you'll introduce those who are with you, please.
I will, yes, thank you. Are you, okay, perfect. And I can advance from the mouse, I take it. I can advance slides from here. Thank you all very much. This greenhouse gas inventory has been quite the journey and an insightful one. I'm delighted to be here tonight to share with you our findings. We're just pulling up the presentation deck. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much. Let me just make sure I can advance properly. Okay, wonderful. I will introduce my partners here in just a moment. First, a few basics to review before we dive in. I'm sure most of you know this, but just for everyone on Zoom, greenhouse gases are the gases in the atmosphere that trap heat from escaping into space. They are natural, yet increased greenhouse gases are contributing to global warming and climate change. The primary greenhouse gases we are discussing are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. Now, a greenhouse gas inventory is a list of emission sources and their quantified output. It's important to note here sources in the definition of this greenhouse gas inventory. I've been asked during this process, are energy audits of buildings, are those included? Are those factored into the greenhouse gas inventory? No, those are not factored in because those are not sources of greenhouse gas emissions. Energy audits might be helpful strategies that you would implement to reduce our greenhouse gases, but those aren't sources of greenhouse gases. So those are not included in an inventory. Another question I've been asked, trees. As we all know, trees are very helpful at filtering and absorbing carbon in the atmosphere. We have a robust tree canopy here in Webster Groves, which is very helpful for air pollution. Could that be factored into this greenhouse gas inventory? No, because trees are not a source of greenhouse gas emissions. So I just like to explain, the very basics of a greenhouse gas inventory really focuses on the sources of greenhouse gases that our community is contributing to the overall atmosphere. So again, this means that we're not talking about air pollution inside of Webster Groves. We're talking about the greenhouse gases that Webster Groves residents and our local government facilities contribute to the overall atmosphere. So an example of this is methane that's produced from the trash that we produce. That methane is emitted from the landfills. Those landfills are not in Webster Groves, but we are contributing to those methane emissions in the landfills, and that's going into the general atmosphere. So just wanted to point out a few parameters of these kinds of inventories. Now, greenhouse gas inventories, they measure, various greenhouse gases. Like I mentioned, we're talking about carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases. But in these inventories, all of those gases are converted to one common metric, and that's the carbon dioxide equivalence. And that just makes it easier to compare and assess during inventory. So during this presentation tonight, you'll notice CO2e, that's the carbon dioxide equivalence, and that encapsulates all of the greenhouse gases, but makes it much easier to compare. Now, by understanding our emissions, we can develop targeted strategies to reduce the impact to the environment. So that's ultimately why we are here, but let's also remember that reduction in emissions is also reduction in costs, okay? All right, so moving on, with just a little background, I think you all remember, but last year we contracted SIUE, Dr. Sharon Locke, with encouragement from the Webster Groves Sustainability Commission to benchmark the Webster Groves community and local government's emissions. Dr. Locke here this evening is a professor of environmental services at Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville, where she teaches courses in environmental education, sustainability, and watershed management and conservation. Her main interest is community-engaged research, where universities partner with community organizations and local governments to solve environmental problems through collaboration. Through these partnerships, her students have developed city greenhouse gas inventories for Granite City and Collinsville, Illinois, and the St. Louis metropolitan region as well. She's also conducted public outreach on water resource management. Dr. Locke received her PhD from the University of Minnesota's Limnological Research Center, where she studied the impact of climate change on lake groundwater interactions. Dr. Locke holds global leadership roles in geoscience education and was recognized with a 2023 Fulbright Specialist Award to conduct science education research in Indonesia. Now, Pragya Sharma, serving as our project's intern, is currently pursuing her master's in environmental sciences at SIUE. Pragya earned her undergraduate degree in forestry in her home country of Nepal before coming to the United States in 2023 to begin her graduate studies at SIUE. The Webster Groves Greenhouse Gas Inventory is her master's program thesis project. And before I draw our partners up here to dive into the results, I'll just tell you a little bit about this process of how we work together. The raw data for this inventory comes from the utilities. And so within our project team, I played the liaison with the utilities and would send data requests out to Ameren, Spire, MSD, Missouri American Water, the rail companies, who am I forgetting? Waste Management, public transit agencies, among some other internal sources as well. So once I received that data, I would send it over to Pragya and to Sharon to input into our software and then calculate and assess. And so the software we used is ICLEI's ClearPath software. And ICLEI is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. It was born out of the United Nations, this organization, but they are today the leading platform for local governments to conduct greenhouse gases. So we are using the current and leading software for local governments. And then lastly, I'll just say that the biggest obstacle to this inventory is that utilities today, this is not a frequent ask of them to provide data for greenhouse gas inventories. As of now, I hope that these requests will become more common in the future, but it often took months and months of going back and forth with the utilities before we would get the data that we needed to be able to input. So we are also very grateful to the utilities for collaborating with us and for offering this data, especially because it's not a frequent ask, but hopefully it will be in the future. And so without further ado, I will ask Dr. Locke to come up, and Dr. Locke and Pragya will dive into the results of our inventory. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Mayor and council members. We're very happy to be here. And I also just want to thank you for what really is a university community partnership that's truly about training our next generation of scientists. So Pragya, as a graduate student, is learning not only environmental sciences, but also about local government, about the importance of local government, and as with my other students, about the difference that you can make in local government. And it's just not something that our students necessarily learn about in their coursework and their research that they do. So very grateful for that. I'm just going to say a few things, a little bit more about the inventory, and Pragya will present the data. One thing to think about is, or to remember, is that a greenhouse gas inventory doesn't just end with the inventory. It's the first step in a circular process. So this diagram shows the first thing is to do an emissions inventory for a base year, and we've chosen the base year here. And then from then on, once you understand what your current emissions are, you can make a forecast based on what you think is going to happen to the population in your community, if you think it's going to decrease or increase. So you make some population or growth forecasts, population as well as growth in commercial or industry. And then from that, develop a plan to maintain, even in the midst of growth, or potentially to decrease, hopefully, to decrease your emissions over time. And then monitor that plan, so that in 2 to 3 years from now, you would do another inventory and hope to see some changes resulting from your climate action plan. And Sean mentioned that there are different scopes of where the greenhouse gases are coming from. And if you read about greenhouse gas inventories, you may see the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So the community inventories include, as Sean said, not only emissions that are happening, for example, due to combustion of fossil fuels in homes in Webster Groves, but also the emissions associated with grid electricity that's delivered to the homes. And then depending on how an inventory is calculated, there's also things such as employee commutes outside of Webster Groves, or waste, as Sean mentioned, that's generated in Webster Groves, but transported to a landfill that's outside of the city. And so that's the case for Webster Groves. Some cities have their own landfills. But so here you have some scope 3 emissions, which is the result of waste that's been transported out. So I just wanted to make you aware of those different terms, because you may see them when you look at greenhouse gas inventories in the future. So the objectives that we had were to establish that baseline, to determine what current greenhouse gas emissions are for Webster Groves, and resulting from the activities in Webster Groves, to contribute that data to what will be a city sustainability plan or climate action plan. Whatever planning is done will be determined by Sean and the rest of the city members and staff. And then also we've identified through determining the sources, we've identified some key areas for reduction. Where are most of your emissions coming from? And so therefore, how might you address some of those major targeted emissions? And so then just for your information, then we chose the base year of 2022. So what you'll see is annual emissions data for the year 2022. We chose 2022 because that's the year for which we have complete data. So it does take a while for the government and utilities to determine all the data, all of the emissions and activities that they had for any given year. So we still don't have, actually 2023 still isn't completely out. So this will be for 2022. It's a good baseline. For example, we could have, for some cities 2 years ago, they were grappling with, should we choose 2020? And of course, since that was a pandemic year, that would have been a very, not a good year. We saw significant greenhouse gas emission reductions during the pandemic year. And then for your information, the population at that point from the census was 23,610. Okay, and so with that, Pragya will talk about, are you doing this one or am I doing this one? I'm doing this one, okay. Okay. Well, I think Sean actually already covered this. So congratulations, you're joining thousands of local governments that have done greenhouse gas emissions inventories. You're using the standard protocol, the accepted protocol for greenhouse gas emissions. ICLEI has the ClearPath software. We use that data, that software platform. We enter the data. All the calculations are done in a standard manner. You've joined a very large community around the world. Cities have an extremely important role to play. As you know, sometimes federal policy around climate change and looking at climate change mitigation and reductions can be really challenging. So when we look at the research, it turns out that cities have really a strong and important role in moving forward the world really on looking at climate resilience. So it's what you've done is important. Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
I'm very excited to be here in front of you all to present the data for City of Webster Groves. And thank you, Sam, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, Dr. Locke, for taking up to the methodologies and everything so I can dive into the findings of GSE.
I'm going to ask you to pull the microphone a little closer to you so that there you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. So we'll start with community inventory. So community inventory provides us the data on the greenhouse gas emission sources that are present within the community, and it is done by the cities which want to know their emissions and track their emissions specifically from the community sectors. Sorry, what is the next button?
And you're going to need to turn the microphone back on too. It's at the bottom there. Perfect.
Okay. This has gone too far. Second one. Okay. 19. Yeah. Next. Yeah, I'm using the right one. Okay. This is down.
Sorry. Is there a button in the bottom right corner, Eric?
Bottom left corner.
Under city. Yeah. Go to
Use your mouse and advance.
I'm just clicking this one.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
All right. Oh, sorry for that.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay, so before moving on to the community inventory data, we will just look at some past years inventories done by our neighboring community of City of Webster Groves. So Granite City did community scale inventory in 2018, and it produced 25,96,584 metric tons of CO2 carbon dioxide equivalents emission, and Collinsville did the community scale inventory in 2019, producing 383,465 metric tons of emission, while Richmond Heights did community scale inventory in 2008, producing 243,621 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So the reason that we are looking at past years inventories of these cities is to do a comparative analysis with City of Webster Groves, which I will present you in the later slides. Okay, now let's dive into the methodologies for community GSE emission inventory. The community GSE emission inventory basically covers 6 major sectors, including residential energy, commercial energy, industrial energy, transportation, solid waste, and water and wastewater. Okay. Um, mhm. Okay, thank you so much. Residential energy, commercial energy, and industrial energy has been categorized in the energy sector. So for community of City of Webster Group's residential energy produces the highest amount of greenhouse gases, which is 20,335 metric tons, and commercial energy, and it is followed by commercial energy with 74,024 metric tons. Industrial energy is in the lower side with 2,643 metric tons. The basically residential energy is produced from the energy source used in our homes, like heating, cooling, and lighting. And commercial energy commercial emission is produced from the energy sources used in commercial buildings and facilities. So the sources for this data was provided us by Emron and Spire. Emron provided us electricity in kilowatt per hour, and Spire provided us natural gas data in therms. Next, please. Okay, now let's look at the transportation sector. Transportation includes 2 sectors, on-road transportation and rail transportation. On-road transportation includes all the vehicles that run through gasoline and diesel on the road. So, and the rail transportation includes all the rails that passes through City of Webster Groups. For transportation, on-road transportation has the highest emission with 24,696 metric tons of carbon dioxide emission, and rail transportation has 1,147 metric tons of carbon dioxide emission. The source of data for on-road transportation was Google EIE, Environmental Insight Explorer, and for rail was BNSF Railroad, Union Pacific Railroad, and Amtrak. Next, please. Okay, now let's look at the solid waste emission for community scale of City of Webster Groups. It includes biological treatment of yard waste and landfill emissions. So biological treatment of yard waste basically includes the emission from the composting of the yard waste, and it is the and landfill emissions produces the potent gas called methane, which produces more carbon dioxide equivalence emission than CO2. So biological treatment of yard waste produces 451 metric tons of CO2e, and landfill emission produces 4,274 metric tons. The source of data for solid waste was waste management. For wastewater, community scale had a total of 636 metric tons of emission from wastewater. So the largest amount of emission was from Lime wastewater treatment plant, and it produced 500 metric tons of carbon dioxide emission. The nitrogen in the effluent discharge added up to 64 metric tons to this data, and open burning of the sloughs and biosolid added up to 72 metric tons, making it 636 metric tons in total. The source for this wastewater data was provided by Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. Now let's look at the carbon dioxide emission by category. For community scale, residential energy is at highest with 53% of the total, and commercial energy is at second highest with 32% of the total. Transportation, solid waste, industrial energy, water and wastewater are at the lower side with 11 to 1 and 0.2% respectively. So the main reason for categorizing our emissions by source is that we can look at the we can look at the key areas that is producing the emission, and we can find out we can plan accordingly to reduce the amount of emission from these sectors. So now let's look at the comparative analysis. So we have already looked at the emissions from these three cities. Now let's look at the emission from Webster Groups for a year 2022. For community scale, Webster Groups has 231,206 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalence emissions. So looking at this, so if this in Granite City had a population of 28,430 in 2018. Collinsville had the population of 24,384. Worcester Groups had a population of 23,610 in 2022, and Richmond Heights had 9,193 93 population. Among these cities, City of Webster Groups produced the least amount of greenhouse gas emission, even if the population of Richmond Heights was half of the population of Webster Groups in 2022. It produced more greenhouse gas than Webster Groups. So what we are trying to say is that the amount of emission from a particular city is not dependent on the population of that city, but it is dependent on the sources of emissions. So looking at this kind of comparative analysis basically helps us to examine our data and on how the emissions are produced and what strategies are working for other cities and what we can apply. Please. Now let's start with the government inventory. Government inventory, can you the next slide? Government inventory, government GSE emissions inventory covers 5 major sectors: street lights and traffic signals, vehicle fleet, buildings and facilities, employee commute, and water and wastewater. So next. Buildings and facilities and street lights and traffic signal comes into the energy sector. The energy used by buildings and government buildings and facilities for the heating and cooling of the buildings produces 2,962 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emission for government sector of City of Webster Groups, whereas street lights and traffic signal is producing 526 metric tons of emission. The street lights and traffic signal sector for government also includes the data for community scale, because community scale emission includes the government as well. So community is a larger scale. So government is the part of a community. So the data includes both community and government sector. So the source for this data was provided by Amrin and Spire again. Now let's look at the transportation sector for emission for government scale of City of Webster Groups. We have vehicle fleet and employee commute. Vehicle fleet basically includes the emergency vehicles from the cities, like patrolling vehicles, ambulances, police vans, and then fire trucks. It produces 280 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalence emission. And now for the employee commute includes the vehicles that the employee of City of Webster Groups use to go to the work and come back to their houses. So it produces 303 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. The employee commute survey was done by City of Webster Groups, and SON prepared the survey for the employees of the City of Webster Groups to fill up, and we got that data. So the source for the transportation sector was provided by City of Webster Groups. The wastewater, the emission from the wastewater for government sector is 243 metric tons in total. So stationary fuel combustion produces 107 metric tons of carbon dioxide emission, and the equivalence emission and LIME wastewater treatment plant from its nitrogen in the effluent discharge produces 64 metric tons, while 72 metric tons has been added to this data by open burning of the biosolids and sludge. So again, the data source is Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District for wastewater. Now let's look at the carbon dioxide equivalence in by category for government scale. Government scale includes has highest emission from buildings and facilities, making it up to 68% of the total. Street lights and traffic signal is at second highest with 12% of the total, and employee commute, vehicle fleet, and wastewater are at the lower side with 7, 6.5, and 5.6 of the total. Some past years inventories for government track includes Collinsville. Collinsville did this inventory in 2019, and it has 5,964 metric tons of CO2 emission. Webster Groups comes in the second place in this one with 4,314 metric tons of emission for the government. And Richmond Heights has 3,857 metric tons of ISCO2 emission. And now let's look at this summary slide for community greenhouse gas emissions in the handouts that you have been provided. You can see this slide. So the total carbon dioxide emission from community scale was 231,206 metric tons. The upper arrow shows that shows the emission from the emission sources which are producing the highest amount of greenhouse gases, that is residential and commercial. So residential energy and commercial energy is at 53% and 32%, making it the highest from the emissions, and transportation, solid waste, industrial energy, and water and wastewater are at the lowest amount, which is indicated by the down arrow. Now let's look at the summary slide for government scale. So for the government scale, the total carbon dioxide emission was 4,314 metric tons. And again, here you can see that buildings and facilities and streetlights and traffic signal are at highest percentage with 68 and 12. And employee commute, vehicle fleet, and water and wastewater are producing less amount of greenhouse gases with 7%, 6.5, and 5.6% respectively. So in the handout that we have been provided in the second page, in the lower right corner, there is a QR code for carbon emission calculation for of your one carbon footprint calculation of your one. So you can, if you want to look at how much emission you are doing by your daily activities, you can scan the QR code and then look at your carbon emission. With this, I think our data presentation is finished. And if you have any questions, you are welcome.
So let me say thank you very much. I know it's probably a little intimidating to do this, and we really appreciate your work.
Thank you so much.
And not in her core.
Yes, and right. And this is not your first language. So very, very.
But yes, we are happy to take questions and talk through this. I know that's a lot of numbers and data to throw at you. So ask away.
I just had one comment that I remember from looking at previous studies, Dr. Locke, about, I can't remember if it was Granite City or Collinsville, but that they did end up replacing the streetlights, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
They made sure that their streetlights had the most efficient light bulbs because they had quite a
high number.
Quite a high number.
I'm just curious, how many stoplights do you know? I mean, what the?
How many you have, or?
No, what the, because I'm thinking they have an abundant number of
Right.
street lights and traffic lights, and especially it would be way different from ours. But
That's right.
What it would take for them to go through and do that work?
I don't have that information, but I
Okay.
can definitely get it from their city manager and then pass it on to Sean to
Okay.
pass on to you. It was a larger percentage for them and they do have a bigger geographic area.
Mhm.
So the streetlights were, and traffic signals were significant for them. Yeah.
And was that a cost savings for them?
Yes. Well,
After the,
Over the
or
long
they,
term.
could they recoup it?
oh, I don't want to say for sure without
Okay.
talking to them.
Okay, just
Because,
another curious
so, but
thing.
the inventory was 2019, so we finished it in 2021. So they should know now.
Okay.
Just by looking at their electricity bill.
Okay,
I can find that out.
yeah.
I'd be interested myself. Yeah.
I do have one question, maybe two. So when if we go out for bids for replacing some lights in our field, which we probably do they make greenhouse emissions as part of the bid process? We send out RFP, tell us what are you doing for greenhouse emissions? To get that information back from that vendor? Am I making any sense?
I have not been involved in the RFP process for streetlights, so I can't say that in that process, if greenhouse gas emissions would be, part of the package, but certainly there are LED streetlights out there. This is certainly like, a growing concern among municipalities. So, I don't know what kind of metrics they can provide, but,
You can ask.
oh, certainly. Yeah, we can ask.
It's the same thing about like waste management, our trash pickup people.
Yes,
When it comes to contract time,
right.
we can ask that question.
We can ask that. And now I do want to say that Dr. Locke and Pragya's subject matter expertise is really about calculating the numbers here and finding our carbon dioxide equivalents. So when it comes to reduction strategies specific to Webster Groves, the state of Missouri, also remember they're on the Illinois side. So they might not have the specific answers you're looking for, but certainly my job over the coming weeks and months will be to look at the various reduction strategies. And we've already had those conversations. And right now we have a very broad list of ideas that those conversations will continue. I know city leadership needs time to also go through these reduction strategies, find out what is feasible, what offers the best return on investment. So there's certainly more conversations to come. But in particular to waste management, I can say that some things that other municipalities have done is to offer bi-weekly service instead of every week. If you want to try and incentivize reducing waste, then giving the consumer an option for not having a weekly pickup, but possibly a bi-weekly pickup, or a smaller roll cart size. Other municipalities have also done that. Right now, the standard with waste management is you get I think it's 96-gallon tote, and it is serviced every week. And that's what we have. There are other ways that municipalities are trying to address reducing waste that we can certainly look into in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could I say something? Just one thing, sort of the scale of making changes, there's sort of the local city scale, and then there's also thinking about your providers. And so, for example, where does the grid electricity, what are the sources of energy for grid electricity? And with time, some of the bigger providers are doing less coal flat-fired and more solar and wind power, for example. And some municipalities will will say we want a certain percentage of our grid electricity to be from renewable energy or renewable energy credits. So that's another sort of bigger picture. One good thing about waste management is that they capture almost all their methane from the waste, the methane that comes from the waste decomposition is captured and then reused as energy. So they've got a very nice system. Yeah.
Awesome. I was wondering, is it better to offset the greenhouse emissions or to actually reduce it? Like, is there a belt and suspenders approach?
Ooh, that's an economist question, I think, in terms of cost saving, but I'm a little hesitant to say, if I were head of in city government, I would be looking at incentives to reduce energy usage in the buildings rather than buying offset credits. Yeah.
And in case this wasn't clear at the beginning, we have two different inventories here technically. So we did a community-wide inventory, which encompasses all of the energy from our residents' homes and vehicles and their waste. And then we also have a government inventory that's solely looking at our local government's facilities, buildings, and our actions here. Both of these, you'll see, it's very clear that the number one source of greenhouse gas emissions is the energy used in our homes and in our buildings. So as much as we can make those buildings and homes more efficient, that's going to offer the greatest impact in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the ways in which we go about doing that are many. There are many different strategies that we can discuss, and we don't have time to get into those tonight. But if you're, just a simple glance, we'll see that focusing on making our buildings and homes more energy efficient would be very helpful.
One last question. So how often should some type of inventory be done?
Great question.
Yeah. The general recommendation is 3 years, which would give you time to develop a plan, put the plan in place, and then do a recalculation. For smaller cities, because there are some resources associated with doing the inventory. But you have everything in place now. You have everything is in the ClearPath software. All the notes, how everything was done and calculated are all available to you going forward. So, and I've impressed upon Pragya, and she's done a great job about putting in enough information that it could be done by another person besides her in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do have one more question.
Anybody else? Let Jamie go. And then we'll
yeah.
come back.
Yes.
Is that all
All
right?
right, thanks. This has just been incredible. I feel like it's so important that we have the data
Yeah.
so that we can make decisions going forward based in the validity of this important issue and all of these numbers. I really think, obviously the facilities, the buildings are the pieces that are going to be the most important to start to make changes toward. But what I always I found entertaining in the Collinsville, because Pam, I think were you on sustainability when we were talking about that? And the thing that I found, I had never thought of the traffic lights as being part of the solution.
Right.
So just understanding where these numbers are coming from is going to be so key to helping us make decisions. I have 125 questions, but I think it's more about the tactics. And so I really just want to say thank you for this. And I do have one question about our region. I think it's great. I didn't know that Richmond Heights has been working on this as well. Is the city or the county of St. Louis? I know the city has a sustainability plan. I don't know how old it is. And I know that they also just implemented building energy performance standards for their larger buildings. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so what's happening right now, so the timing for this is great because I do have another graduate student that's an intern with East West Gateway Council of Governments, and they are doing the main count, so St. Louis County, St. Louis City, so all those I think it's something like 12 counties.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the data county county-based data for, 12 counties. That will be finished, we hope, in December. And so we'll have the whole St. Louis, both Missouri and Illinois side data, but not at the city level, right? So yours is at the city level, but it will be at the county level. It's been very helpful, actually, because sometimes, for example, they're working on their rail data now. And we spent a lot of time with Webster Groves figuring out exactly how to get the rail data and be very precise with it. And so that informed the larger inventory. And then vice versa, when they had access to data, if necessary, we could scale it down to Webster Groves. So it's been mutually beneficial.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that will be available. I'll certainly make sure that Sean knows when that's out.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
And I haven't forgotten, I'll talk to Collinsville about the streetlights. And I know you have I heard you had a lot of questions, or happy to have a follow-up call with you.
Great, thank you very much.
I was just curious, I know you did an eco ed series last month.
Yes.
How did the residents react? Can you tell us more how that evening went?
You were there.
Yeah. The residents, it was really well received. I think our Q&A session lasted as long as our presentation. I mean, there was a very healthy conversation afterwards. They were very appreciative and very supportive, and I thought it went really well.
Yeah, there was nothing contentious, no conflict, no antagonizing questions. I thought we were excited because they asked a lot of questions and thoughtful questions, and they were genuinely interested in, okay, what do we do with this now? Great. Yeah.
Right, that's a perfect segue, because I think probably the best way for us to end this segment of the meeting, Sean, is for you to tell us, and you alluded to it a little bit, but what do you see as sort of the next couple of steps in this process that you need to go through? I know you all aren't quite ready for us to help you prioritize things. So can you give us what you think is the progress that comes next?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. Pragya and Dr. Locke did provide a healthy starting point of different strategies we can look at. And so right now our list is very broad. And not necessarily tailored to the St. Louis County region or the state of Missouri. And so I think the next step is really looking at the resources locally that we have. Certainly we have the building exchange, the St. Louis Building Exchange and the Green Builders Association, but it's looking at our local resources, because the grid in Illinois is very different from the grid in Missouri, and the incentives that are available, in other regions are going to be different than in the state of Missouri. So I think the next steps are really looking at our broader reduction strategies and then finding our local resources on how to get that done. And then also we participate in the Mid-County Sustainability Consortium. And so that is the cities of Clayton, Brentwood, Richmond Heights, Maplewood, us, and I might be missing one, but they have not done a greenhouse gas inventory yet. Well, Richmond Heights, we now have, although it's been over a decade now. But I think, but staying involved with those municipalities and hearing what they're doing. I know the cities of Clayton and Brentwood have earned a SoulSmart designation. SoulSmart is an organization that helps local governments increase solar and renewable energy. And so for residents, but also for providers, just to build out that infrastructure. And so there's various local resources that now we need to look into and start working with.
Do you know if the school district has done anything like this?
That's a great question. I have not heard that the Webster Grove School District, I have not heard that they've done anything.
Thank you.
Mhm.
This was a really good presentation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate everything.
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead.
I was just to say thanks for partnering with us. Yeah.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, I can't thank you enough it makes a big difference in education, right? It's really an educational partnership. And we're happy to do this work in service of the community of Webster Groves. Sean has been an amazing, as you can imagine, just an amazing resource partner in this. And then I think what's also been great is Pragya agreeing that she wanted to do this for her master's thesis. So there's still more work to come. She'll be doing some more analysis. So it's sort of bonus work
Great.
that you're getting.
Great. Well, we are very, very grateful for your work and really appreciate the presentation and the bonus that we're going to get out of this as well. And Sean, thank you to you very much for this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to stay in the same ballpark here and move to our next item, and that is the Climate Resilience Fund discussion. Just a little context, if you remember, we agreed that we would have such a fund, but wanted to work a little bit out about what we might use those funds for. Councilmember Hasselmeyer's worked very hard on that and has presented us with some options. So I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so on the morning of July 26, 2022, some of you might remember, the St. Louis region experienced a massive rainfall event. It was the most prolific one the St. Louis metropolitan area has seen since records began in 1874. And I'm quoting now, roughly 25% of our normal yearly rainfall fell in about 12 hours, and the highest 6-hour total, over almost 8 inches, surpassed the normal amount of rain for the months of July and August combined. What is most impressive is how quickly the all-time record for a 24-hour rainfall event was surpassed. It only took 6 hours since midnight Central Standard Time to surpass the old record, and that is from the National Weather Service. These storms are supercharged by climate change. Of course, no one has a crystal ball, but even if we stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow, we are still locked into at least 30 years of climate-related disruption. Some say climate chaos. In the light of the catastrophic flooding in the Southeast, just in the last few weeks, we've seen 2 massive hurricanes move through our country. I found myself wondering how our community might respond to such a disaster. I lost sleep thinking about that. The money that we set aside earlier in the budget was designated as a climate resilience fund. The purpose would be to be ready to buy out properties deemed by FEMA to be substantially damaged. It would also give council confidence in future FEMA buyout discussions and reassurance that we have vendors in place for the next disaster to assist our community's needs. This is also in response to our sustainability plan for Webster Groves and is adjacent to the stormwater management plan decisions that we have on the horizon. And also, I'd like to thank Pam and Emily who helped me step through some of the finer points of getting this organized.
All right, so questions or comments? I can start if we'd like. And I've already mentioned this to Jamie. I am a little wonder where the council is on the language here about substantially versus repetitively, because we have done repetitively damaged buyouts. We have not before done substantially damaged, and so I think if we're going to put language like that in there, we need to be very clear about what we're saying. Because if I'm remembering correctly, and I don't know if Dr. Peoples or Eric remember, that flood alone would have wiped out this fund if we did substantially damage. And so that's just a thing for consideration in terms of language here. But I do feel like one of the things I like about this is we weren't ready last time. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have the money available. The American Rescue Plan came along and helped us with the money. So that was one thing, but I really like the idea of getting ready. I just want to be careful about who then believes they are entitled to funding from this.
Exactly. Because whatever you call the fund, it's still funded by taxpayers' money. Unless there's something else that we're looking at. So, I mean, I would be just a little bit, would want to know more, because we still have to answer the same questions that we answered with this last buyout. do we use taxpayers' money to buy out properties that are damaged or impacted by floods that were, we didn't know were coming, but they're in flood zone? So again, I would just wanna, it would take, more, work or information. Where are the funds coming from? What is the taxpayer input? Because at the end of the day, this appears to be to still do the same thing that we were tasked with before, which was utilizing taxpayers' money to buy out properties, and for some and not others.
I think a fund of this magnitude is important. I'm a little concerned about what we're concentrating on, which is flooding. I would rather us see us concentrate funds to the stormwater improvement plan, which would then limit funding. I think limit the impact of flooding in this, at least in this city. To me, the more pressing concern is how do we recover from a catastrophic climate-related event such as a tornado or earthquake. I guess an earthquake going to be climate change necessarily. I don't know enough about it, but that to me, to have the safety net and effectively an insurance fund in the event something like that were to happen. I am not interested in going down this path again of deciding repetitive or substantially damaged. I don't think it's worth our time. I understand that it has huge impacts on individual people. But I think if we're going to look at climate change and the impacts of this region, particularly this city, I think tornadoes is more pressing and also more catastrophic than flash flooding.
I mean, I would like to address some of these, what you're talking about as far as flooding, tornadoes, et cetera.
Turn your mic on.
The discussions come up a lot about, well, they don't have insurance, or insurance should have covered it, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is that I've done a lot of conversations about insurance with insurance agents and other advisors, and that essentially street flooding is not covered by homeowners insurance. Only wastewater is. Lenders require flood insurance, but if an owner owns it outright, it's difficult to get insurance. And if you've had two events within 10 years, you're likely to get canceled. The people that we did not, the substantially flooded homes, they had been repeat flooded, and they had been substantial, meaning all those people had water into the living areas of their home. The first floors were flooded. They had no safety net, or the safety net was supposed to be the government assistance, and they did not get that because they met the bar that FEMA set, but we said no to taking those funds. The OMCI funds were available. They are available for buyouts, and we could have used them. So
Isn't the first safety net flood insurance? If you buy, like, I mean, I know that there's a max of like 250,000. I'm not saying it's enough. That's a FEMA issue though. But isn't that the first safety net? And if you're buying in a flood zone, I mean, why should the other taxpayers be obligated to cost the bill of a known choice not to buy flood insurance? Sure.
But if it were, once the one-time people, those people did not have insurance, not because they chose not to pay. They couldn't get insurance anymore because they'd made too many claims for previous smaller flooding.
So the individuals that we bought out could not get insurance?
I'm talking about the people that the people that we denied.
They did not have insurance because they were unable to get insurance?
Yes.
Because they were in the flood.
Because they had repeat times
So
But
they
it
had
was-
insurance and then it
Right.
just got canceled on them.
Right.
So
Not all of them. Some of them did have insurance, I thought.
Yeah. I do know there was at least two of them that, when they financed their home, they had to have flood insurance as
Right.
part of the package. They paid off their home, so they canceled the flood insurance as well. That shouldn't have happened. You know, I think that's something that the community can be, made aware of, but you know, for their decisions not to properly cover their home, we should not be responsible for making them whole.
Could I jump in? for a
We
second?
did have FEMA do part of that.
Well, yeah, but we're
Most of
still
it.
using taxpayer money to give them whatever portion it was.
So when we talk about this and we went rounds with this before, we end up talking about kind of individual responsibility versus the role of local government. I understand that's an important conversation. I want to be careful that we're not placing blame on people for a catastrophic flood event that even if they had flood insurance would have flooded their home, that wouldn't have gone away. But with this fund, I think when Jamie and Pam and I started talking about it, I mean, I had more questions than answers on which way to go. I mean, I have a whole list of questions on this. You know, is this one-time funding? Are we planning to replenish this? How do we just, if we are going to use it for buyouts, how do we decide who qualifies? Is it repetitive loss? Is it substantial? Like, there's so many questions that you could delve into the details here. One of the things that we talked about too was, do we do things that are at a community level? I don't know that we have any shelters in Webster. Do we partner with the school district on cooling shelters and heat shelters and things like that? Are there things that we can do that mitigate the risk before that there's an event, so people who might get flooded don't get flooded, so they don't have to face, you know, do they get bought out? So I think there's more on the table here for this fund. I think the buyouts are a big piece of it and a big piece that started the conversation, but I think there's some more options here that we can maybe find some common ground on too.
Why is this centered on flooding?
That's how I opened it up, only because I feel like that was very topical for this council. And it's one of our risks here in Webster. I know that we are on we've been talking about risk assessment and trying to understand that. I went down so many rabbit holes when researching this because of all of the climate change impacted types of disasters, right? So we're talking about what happens with a storm in the middle of July and we are all without power. Where's our cooling center? What happens, God forbid, a tornado move through here? You know, these are all things that are unfortunately, have happened in the past, but supercharged because of climate change. And so having some of these pre-positioned agreements with, if it's like, and I'm getting into the weeds here, but like pre-positioning ourselves to have relationships with the school district, with, what does it look like to have battery backup for cooling centers, that sort of thing. Like, this is a conversation that we need to have, because this isn't like a question of if, it's just when.
And I like all of that, what you just said, Jamie. I think that doing the pre-position packages, regardless of the catastrophic event, makes the most sense. I don't want to touch repetitive or substantially damaged. If and when we need to get to that point, we will get to that point. But I don't want to touch it. I don't think the citizens have an appetite for it. But I definitely think there is a need to have those pre-position packages in the event of a major catastrophic event, such as cooling centers, dumpsters, all that kind of stuff. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I agree. Dumpsters, I think the city provided dumpsters in the last situation, which is fine. Same thing with, I would need a stronger definition for cleaning and restoration services. Do we offer a percentage, or how do we offer it? Who determines, this is really something that we want to use taxpayer money to do. And cooling centers, I agree, we can partner with other municipalities, the school district. They got the greatest open spaces, the gym, their center across on Brentwood for our residents to go in the event of a storm. But I would be, I think, more conversation, more information about buying out repetitive or substantially damaged homes in these, a lot of discussion, and I would be hesitant to use taxpayer money for that.
So the reason that I feel like it's important that we at least have this conversation to hold money aside with taxpayer dollars is that I went back and listened to the meeting that you all had. This was before my time here, numerous times. And I felt like one of the reasons for hesitation was that where would this money come from? Well, you know, having this money here, I'm not saying it's going to take care of all the problems, but it's not nothing. And my personal feeling about government is taking care of each other. Like our taxpayer dollars are being used right now to help the people that were impacted by Helene and Milton. Like, I feel like that's our responsibility. That's my personal feeling on government.
Okay, we seem to be of two minds here, if I can summarize the conversation so far. There's a strong consensus about the acceptability, the favorability to do something not regarding flooding per se, but just responses to multiple kinds of disasters, fine tune a little bit what those might be. I mean, you've referred to them as kind of pre-packaged services or partnerships. We have a clear division on whether flooding should be a part of this. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure where to go from here. One option is to go ahead and work on what we have a strong consensus on and see if we can shape that first and then come back to the flooding conversation. I don't think we're going to resolve that tonight. Or one is to just say, let's take whether it's all this money or a portion of this money and focus on those things that we have strong consensus on, and leave the fund at that. I honestly at this point don't know where to try and push this. And so does anybody have thoughts on this?
Yeah, like I said, I have no problem with option 2B, the dumpster and finding out the cooling centers and determine what is cleaning and restoration services, and all of additional things under 2B, I guess, education of the residents, ensure their ready lines communications to.
So Emerson, I think we're okay with that.
Yeah.
My point is, I think we're okay with that. I'm not sure what we as a council ought to do with the second part, and I believe that Dr. Peoples would like to weigh in.
I would. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the very difficult discussion. I would encourage you to go back to the prioritization exercises that you all were working on, Madam Mayor. We've had several discussions recently where there's a lot of funds at play, and the stormwater management, for example. Implementing that plan, going back to, Intuition and Logic's presentation, is millions of dollars. That gets to climate resiliency and the discussions that this council is having currently. We have talked about the OMCI funds, as Councilwoman Bliss noted, and we talked about them throughout the flood process. And at that time, we were reserving them for some of the stormwater management. My point in mentioning is that our funds are limited. They just are. And so how can we put them towards the best return on investment in doing something community-wide rather than at the individual level? And I know that's a difficult discussion, but my recommendation would be that the prioritization exercises continue and then really determine how to earmark these funds, if you will, and perhaps make it a broader scope other than just flooding. And in terms of the buyout, I'm reluctant there, and not so much for the conversations that have been had, but we're 2 years into this, and the buyouts for the 2 homes that council did approve aren't completed yet. And so even if we had approved the other ones and moved forward, which would have blown the budget, we wouldn't have had funds for that. But there's just nothing quick in that. And so I would just like to remind folks of that as well. It may be a full 3 years before those processes are done.
Is it possible for us to really get the down low on insurance and what type of disasters are covered with insurance and what isn't? And how you acquire that? What are the criteria for being able to acquire it? I think that's important because I think there is an element of, as Emily said, looking at as if it's the homeowner's fault that their homes were flooded and they're still without a habitable place that they own.
So insurance companies are so vastly different. I don't know if we could come up with a down low on that. We did have, and we could ask again, Ms. Karen McHugh, I believe was her name, who came and presented to us from FEMA about the National Flood Insurance Program. And the answer around, you know, the homeowners, whether it was substantially damaged or the repetitively damaged, their insurance statuses were across the board. Some simply didn't have it, others did have it. There wasn't just a one size fits all. So we can try to do some insurance research for you if that's the direction that council would go. I don't know that it's going to make this conversation any clearer.
To me, I think it's important that we're all informed. We have all the information.
I'm looking at a lot. So here's what I'm going to suggest. Since you all aren't giving me much help here. I'm going to suggest that we've learned a fair amount from this conversation and that perhaps Councilmember Hassemeyer and I and Dr. Peoples can maybe regroup a little bit and see where we are and what might come next. Since I don't think we can decide that here tonight. Is that acceptable?
Fair.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Peoples? Do we have, certainly we have a continuity plan in the event of a natural disaster as a government?
We
As
do.
a government, for
we do.
continuity of governmental operations.
Yeah. Can that continuity of governmental operations plan be segued into a community continuity plan, such as, you know, thinking about how to ensure the safety and the well-being of our residents in the event of a natural disaster?
It can be segued into it, and it should be. There's a lot more players that have to come to the table, and that becomes the dilemma. The city can certainly initiate it, but you know, we need the school district to come to the table. We need Webster University. We need faith-based organizations, because what the city is, and the role of government, in many of these instances, is to be the convener. And so how we can help organize it, but we can't carry out all of the needed services. So absolutely.
I guess to me, that's what it seems like option 2B here is doing. It's more of the continuity, the community, and ensuring that everyone is safe, has the well-being and food resources in the event of a natural disaster. And I think that would be an excellent thing for a local government to do and supplement to FEMA in the event FEMA either doesn't declare this a national disaster, doesn't give funds for this for a particular event. And I think taxpayer money being spent that way makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, that to me is my vision or my thought process in looking at something like a climate resilience fund. And that's in addition to us trying to prevent or limit climate changes through, or not only prevent, but also then to counter anything that is caused by climate change, such as our stormwater master plan, our green energy and everything like that we're doing already.
Yeah. It's a public safety issue to make sure that the community understand, here are the things you need to do to mitigate your risk. You know, getting insurance, flood insurance is one of them. They need to make that decision with their insurance agent to see if they can get flood insurance. It's just, yeah, just public, just giving the public safety information out.
I think also at this point, Dr. Peoples, it might be good for council to receive a copy of our emergency action plan. That's not the right title, but one does exist. And I never saw it until I became mayor. So we probably should share that with council just so that everyone understands what that is.
I certainly don't mind having that shared, Madam Mayor. I'll need to get with Chief Acevez. I'm quite sure he's working towards revamping many components of it. As he's been
Well, I
looking
know
at some
he
of
is,
our other
and I
work plans.
know, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, didn't mean to talk over you, but I have talked to Chief Ellis as well, and I know that there's some work to be done on it, but certainly council should know what we're working with at the moment. Okay. We are going to move on now to our item number 3. Councilwoman Alexander, could you call for the first and second reading of bill number 9255?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9255.
Second.
Bill 9255, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 70 by adding a new section 70.227, prohibiting the possession, manufacture, transport, repair, and sale of certain weapons.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. Would you like for us to go ahead and do first and second reading of all 3, and then we'll discuss them in totality?
That would be my suggestion.
All right, then let's go ahead and have the second reading, please.
I do have a specific question on 9255.
You can ask, when we get out through all 3, you can ask a specific question on any of them.
Okay.
Bill 9255, second reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 70 by adding a new section 70.227, prohibiting the possession, manufacture, transport, repair, and sale of certain weapons.
Would you go ahead and do bill number 9256 for us, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9256.
Second.
Bill 9256, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 70 by adding a new section 70.226 related to the unlawful transfer of weapons to a minor and failure to report a stolen or lost deadly weapon or explosive.
All right, let's go ahead with second.
Bill 9256, second reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 70 by adding a new section 70.226 related to the unlawful transfer of weapons to a minor and failure to report a stolen or lost deadly weapon or explosive.
Right, Councilmember Bliss, could you call for first and second reading of bill number 9271, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9271.
Second.
Bill 9271, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 70 by adding a new section, section 70.228, related to carrying a weapon in a public building and failure to leave when requested.
We're just going to keep you rolling along.
There you go. Bill 9271, second reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 70 by adding a new section 70.228 related to carrying a weapon in public buildings and a failure to leave when requested.
Right, thank you. So our city attorney, Mr. Bruntrager, is going to do a little bit of explanation of these. We'll open it up for questions to you, and then Chief Acevez is also available if we have questions for him.
So what you have here is a combination of many different ordinances that have been passed in the state of Missouri since 2013. If you recall, in 2013, the legislature for the very first time attempted to completely preempt the area of weapons and weapon regulations. In those days, they also created a law that said that they would prosecute any police officer in the state of Missouri who attempted to enforce any weapons laws, including federal weapons laws. That ultimately was vetoed by then Governor Nixon, and it just fell short of overriding the veto. In 2014, they passed a new law, which is 21.750, which again stated that they are preempting all weapon regulation in the state of Missouri, and that no municipality or quasi-governmental entity or sub-entity can pass any law or ordinance that would not be exactly what was done according to the state law. But they did leave some exceptions. They left some doors that were open there, and we're taking advantage of those doors. In 2021, the legislature again decided that they were going to preempt completely or attempt to preempt completely the area of gun and weapon regulation. And they again prohibited the enforcement of federal gun laws That was declared unconstitutional on October the 20th of 2023. So within that confine, what we were looking for is what we could do on a municipal level that would provide some assistance to law enforcement and would regulate firearms in a meaningful yet legal way that wasn't also going to invite additional litigation because there are people out there who will spend a lot of money in order to overcome these rules and regulations. And so what you have in front of you are three things that are three different sections that I think address those things that we can do and make a statement, and it's an important statement to make. The first one is an easy one. It has to do essentially with the prohibiting the possession, manufacture, transport, and repair of machine guns and certain types of automatic weapons that are prohibited by federal law. So all we're doing here is reciting effectively what's already done at the federal level. Now, why do that at the state level? Well, Chief Assef, as I'm sure will agree with me, one of the things that we see when a police officer is confronted with a weapon, and he doesn't know exactly what it is, but it appears to fall within the confines of the federal limitation, is they're going to say, we're not 100% sure how the federal laws would apply, but if there are municipal ordinances that would apply, it gives them traction to take further action. It gives them probable cause. There is a framework within which they can take additional steps, and this would provide that to them. Do we really expect that we will see prosecutions of machine gun possession in our municipal courts? I don't, but it becomes meaningful for law enforcement for a lot of different reasons, okay? So that's one reason why this is here. And this has also been adopted in Creve Coeur, in Maryland Heights, and in Kansas City. So there are other places that have done this, exactly the same language. It's not been challenged, and I believe this is a proper and safe thing to do. The next section under Bill 9256 has to do with the unlawful transfer of weapons to a minor and a failure to report a stolen or lost deadly weapon or explosive. Now, this again mirrors federal law to the extent that you cannot transfer a weapon to a minor. But there had been some discussion, and some municipalities have actually gone so far as to say a minor can't possess a firearm. That's not something that we can do here. That's not something we can do in Webster Groves, because if we're talking about minors, we're talking about the juvenile code, and that has to be done at the state level. We can't prosecute you here in our courts for that sort of thing. So we're limiting this to someone who would transfer a weapon, a firearm, to a minor without parental consent. Now, again, that's what the state law says. That's what the federal law says. We're consistent with both of those things, because one of the things that the state law does say is that we can pass ordinances, but it has to be consistent with what's at the state level, okay? So again, this is consistent with what is done at both the state and the federal level. It prohibits the transfer to a minor of a firearm or ammunition without parental consent, okay? The third one is a little bit of a step, but again, it's a safe step I think that we're taking, which allows us to regulate the possession of a weapon, including a concealed weapon, in a public building. So initially I started down this path thinking I'm going to deal with open carry. This does deal with open carry, but it also deals with concealed weapons in a public building, okay? So we have the right to pass a law that would prohibit the possession even of a concealed weapon in a public building. Now, if you look, we've got two sections, two parts here. One is the failure to leave. So under the first section, if you're here and it's determined that you are carrying a concealed weapon in a public building, so that would be City Hall, and it's determined that you have it, police are able to see it, they must first request that you leave. It's only if you refuse to leave that the second part of this then comes into play, and then there's a provision for fines in the event that they refuse to leave under these circumstances. So again, this is something that we've seen in Maryland Heights. It's something that we've seen in Kansas City. It's not been challenged. I have no reason to think it would challenge here, but I don't think we're done. Okay, so there's still one more section that I want, and that has to do with the open carry. Now, open carry in Missouri can be prohibited by ordinance, okay? However, it does not extend to someone who has a concealed weapon permit. Now, concealed weapon permits are no longer required for the purpose of carrying concealed weapon permits, but there's still a provision in state law that says if you have such a permit, you can open carry in some places where you'd otherwise be prohibited from doing so. So I've been watching this carefully. There was an ordinance that was passed in Kansas City just about a month ago, and it wasn't yet finalized. And so I was waiting to see if there would be any action taken. I'm going to come back to you with one more provision that will have to do with open carry and the prohibition of open carry entirely within the confines of the city of Webster Groves, except to those who have concealed weapon permits. Now, why would that make a difference to us again? Well, we don't see a lot of it, but we did in the parade. If you recall, we had certain groups that wanted to open carry in the parade, and that was a public safety concern. So we have a right to take that action. That will be what you see next. I think these are good first steps. I've been very careful, and these are rabbit holes to run down when you're looking at gun legislation and what's out there. But again, I now feel confident that we can do a ban on public carry within the city of Webster Groves, not just in public buildings.
All right, Emerson, you had a question.
Yeah, it was just on 9255 under penalty. I don't think there's any.
Right. So again, I'm leaving that open for right now, and I will have that amended before you vote on it in its final form.
Thank you very much.
Right. Yes, because it's supposed to be consistent with the penalties in state law, but those don't necessarily fit what we can do. So again, they've done this in Maryland Heights. I'm looking for the penalty section. I will have that in for the next one. Good catch.
Thank you.
Yes.
Under 9255, so that's saying that this is prohibiting the sale of certain weapons in the city.
Yes, ma'am.
And would that also include accessories to weapons?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, like what do they call them, bump stocks?
Bump stocks, it's in here.
And
trigger switch. Thank you, whoever said that. Thank you, chief. Yes, trigger switches and that sort of thing is in here.
And then for 9256, where does this address a parent's responsibility for the actions carried out by a child with a weapon?
I don't understand.
So, for example, you have children that have perhaps gotten hold of weapons or gotten weapons from the home, and they go to school and shoot people. You know, I think it wasn't just in Minnesota,
Right.
where the parents were also held liable
In Michigan,
for the
yeah.
actions of the child.
Right. It does not directly deal with that. What this deals with is someone who is not a parent or a guardian giving access to a firearm to a minor. Okay. So again, if I'm getting it out of the home and I'm just taking it from the home because it was the parents and they failed to lock it up or secure it, however they were going to do it, that would not be covered by this ordinance.
Is that something that's covered in this state?
I can't, I've looked for that. I can't find anyone that's ever passed an ordinance that holds someone responsible for that at the municipal level, or that would allow us to do it because it's being done at the state level. Because Section 5, Chapter 571 of the Missouri Code of the revised statutes of the state of Missouri is where you see all of the gun limitations. 21750 is a specific provision that is the preemption language that gives them the preemptive control over these things. So under 571, that's where you would find language that you're talking about, and there's nothing in there like that. That holds a parent or a guardian responsible if they fail to secure or lock up a gun and then it's taken by a minor and used for the commission of a crime.
I have one question, well, two, I guess. Does 9255 include sales of guns like at an estate sale or ghost guns?
It includes well, it doesn't include ghost guns specifically, but it does include, again, specific things because we're mirroring at this point the federal statutes, and they're going to add ghost guns, but they haven't done that yet. So once that's done, we can amend it and add it.
And so what are ghost guns?
Ghost guns are the ones that are made out of materials that can't be determined by a metal detector. So they're made out of plastics or whatever it is they're made out of. You walk through a metal detector and it won't see them.
So our ordinance is strictly about guns. There's other weapons, switchblades, knives.
We have that already. We have that provision in our ordinances already. This is all about firearms.
Okay.
Yeah, and since 2013, it's always been about firearms.
I have a question to Chief Aceves. For the third ordinance 9271. You know, when someone comes in a public building and they have a weapon with them, you know, everybody's safety is compromised. How do you request someone to leave? I mean, what actions do you take if that were to happen?
Sure. I think a big part of that is, you know, the responsibility for that lies on us as an administration. Signage, that's common sense approach. And then having something on our website as well to educate the public so that people know when they come in, know what the expectations of behavior are. If we encountered a situation like that, we would conduct ourselves the way we conduct ourselves in every other interaction. We deal with armed people every day. And, you know, having a respectful conversation and using the tools that we've accumulated over long law enforcement careers in those interactions, 99% of the time, people are going to do exactly what we're asking them to do. And if the situation developed into something else, we would handle it appropriately.
Do they have to completely leave the premises for you to think they are gone or just out of the building?
So if they're not adhering to what the ordinance indicates, we would ask them to leave, and they would have to leave based on what the ordinance says.
So can we have it be on property?
No, because it actually has a provision which says they can take the firearm and put it in their car and then come
If
back.
it's parked. Okay,
Everything. I know.
Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah, I was,
Your question?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
I was gonna ask you about 5.6. The definition of recklessly is unfortunately
Mhm.
very specific.
Mhm.
And it almost turns into purposeful, it seems
Mhm.
like. I was wondering, is that because of state law?
Yes. Yes, it mirrors the state law. Yes, yes. And until that pendulum swings the other way, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? I just want to say thank you. I know you've spent a lot of time and a lot of energy sorting through this
Thank you.
in a way, but you know, this is important, but it's also important that we do it in a way that doesn't get us in unnecessary trouble as well.
Yes,
So-
and candidly, it was a truly rewarding experience to try and go down all those rabbit holes and figure this out. But it's been purposely made confusing. It's been purposefully made ambiguous so that there's a difficulty in enforcement, and I don't understand it. But again, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad to do it, and frankly, I'm proud of it. So
The
thanks.
state has had
Thank
some
you.
of these pending for the last 2 years.
Mhm.
So I've been monitoring myself.
All right, is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? Councilmember Smith, would you mind calling for its approval?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander, Councilmember Hicks and Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Hasselmeyer.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, we have made some reappointments, actually. Green Space Advisory Commission, Corin Purcell, Historic Preservation Commission, Carol Dunkey, and Angela Thompson. All right, and I do not believe we have anything for closed.
moved.
So
Oh, I got ahead of myself.
we will reconvene on the federal election day.
Whoa.
Oh. I assume we're gonna have a short agenda.
Emerson's invited us all over to his.
Thanks, Marie.
Yeah. It's not high enough to make anybody jump off, but.
No, it's gonna be a good